Prime Minister Johnson, Mr. Johnson. So the question to you, in this circumstance, what would Winston Churchill do? Just as in the United States, we ask, what would Ronald Reagan do? So please, to you.
Well, what Churchill would do is exactly what President Volodymyr Zelensky has been doing so heroically over the last 3 years, and that's making sure that we keep America engaged. And we're going through a nightmare at the moment of Orwellian language about what's happening and victim blaming of a kind I haven't seen before in my life. To say that Ukraine started the war, you might as well say that America provoked the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. It's absolute rubbish, and we need to call it out. But it's very important that we don't lose perspective and we keep focus on winning. That's what the title of this conference is, and Ukraine is going to win. And I remain optimistic. And it's one of the things that's so tragic about the language that we're hearing about Ukraine at the moment from Washington is it's such an insult to the heroism of the Ukrainian soldiers, some of whom are here today, and their incredible achievements. And they deserve our wholehearted support and encouragement. And when I look at for instance, the reality of what the Americans are proposing, I am not that disheartened. Everybody knows there's a minerals deal on the table today, right? And I think it has every prospect of being signed. And frankly, I think it should be signed. Because it commits the United States in black and white to a free, sovereign and secure Ukraine, and it commits the United States to future financing for Ukraine. That is not to be sneezed at. And yes, to get back to Winston Churchill, John, he paid a terrible price. The UK paid a terrible price for Lend-Lease in 1941. There's no doubt that this deal is good for the United States, but we gave up a lot of bases for a load of old rust buckets from the US. We stopped paying Lend-Lease, folks, in 2006 when we signed the last check. What Trump is trying to do is get the Europeans to step up. And we've got to be honest with ourselves, we haven't done enough. When did you really hear European countries advocate NATO membership for Ukraine over the last 2 years? When did you hear a powerful, passionate campaign for that? When did you hear everybody talks about the 300 billion. But when did you hear that from European countries? Huh? It's not coming from the governments. It's coming from places like this. So what we need now is everybody to be serious and to get real and to listen to what Trump is actually saying and doing and proposing. And that means we have to come up with he said he doesn't mind UK troops on the ground in Ukraine. That's great. Well, then we need to make that real. And together with the French and other countries, we need to do just that. And we need to show how we're going to provide Ukraine with the support that they need. And, I remain absolutely defiantly optimistic about the chances of this country. The US is committed, black and white, to a free, secure, sovereign Ukraine. You can't have a sovereign country without the ability to decide which clubs you're going to belong to. Sovereign country can remain committed to joining NATO. That's sovereignty. Sovereign country can remain free to allow whatever troops it wants to come on its soil to support it. That's sovereignty. Now, Putin could never accept that. The US has already committed to that. I think Putin is ultimately going to fail and Ukraine is going to succeed. And I remain completely optimistic about the potential of this country. Slava Ukraini.
I'm going to follow up, Mr. Johnson, because what you said was quite interesting and provocative. You mentioned the Orwellian language. You undoubtedly saw that President Trump was chastised by two newspapers that have been very supportive of him, the Wall Street Journal and the New York Post. You may have also noticed that at least 12 or even more than that, Republican lawmakers, while they didn't call out Trump, they contradicted all of the false facts that he presented. How do you see this in terms of momentum in the United States on these issues to help Trump move in the direction that you said he is going towards?
I think we just need to keep calling it out. And look, why is he this minerals deal? And everybody, I think what I worry about is people in Ukraine will freak out about it. But not a penny can flow to this fund that is shared between Ukraine and the United States until you have a free, sovereign, and secure Ukraine, right? So there's a big prize here. I think what the president is trying to do, as I interpret it, is to show something to his Ukraino-skeptic Republican base. And the tragedy is he's been listening for too long to people like Tucker Carlson, who are basically taking the Kremlin line. And I think as I interpret what's happening, he needs to show them that he's got something in exchange for continuing American support. But I would put it to you that continuing American support is well worth the price for Ukraine.
My colleagues also at Ministry of Foreign Affairs have written quite a good paper about how we can take Russian 300 billion frozen assets without breaking the rules that we are so worried about, even though our rules are being spit on every single day, but we're still very worried about them, but we can still do that. So let's take Russian money for Ukraine. Wow, that's a really great idea.
Powerful answer. Mr. Johnson, you want to jump in here? Or I'll go back to you.
I totally agree that, but we've been saying that for 3 years now about the 300 billion, and with great respect to colleagues here, why do you not hear this actually from the Council of Ministers in the EU? Why is this not in the conclusions of European summits? Why are we not hearing that the 300 billion should be? To your point, there's not enough political will to do this. And it's all very well for us to come to conferences in important places like this and advocate this, but unless governments really get behind it, unless European governments really get behind it, the Trump administration is not going to take us seriously on this point. They are actually quite interested in this idea, people around Donald Trump. They're very interested, but unless they hear loudly from the Europeans that we want this done, they're not going to do it. So let's hear it from the Europeans.
Okay, thank you. Macron and Starmer going to Washington this week is really interesting. What impact do you think that will have on President Trump, given what you know, what they're going to say, given what they've said publicly?
It depends what they say. So I just heard Jade say that we can't do peacekeeping or peace enforcement. We can't actually put boots on the ground. This is crazy. This is simply going to enrage the. If we go in without a plan for enforcement of the peace deal by Europeans, we will, I'm afraid, be heavily marked down by Washington, and we will lose credibility insofar as we Europeans have credibility at the moment. We have to step up. It's no good us all. It's like with the 300 billion. It's no good us all saying, "Oh, we want to do this," but actually it turns out to be impossible or dangerous or risky. We're either serious about the defence of our continent or we aren't. Keir Starmer, I thought, said something very brave and right, which was that he's willing to put UK boots on the ground in the context of a peace agreement in Ukraine. I think that's the right thing to do. And I'll tell you why I think, above all, it's the right thing to do. Because it asserts visibly something that Putin finds anathema. Right? Let's take it to Putin. He says to Ukraine, you can't have foreign troops, you can't have NATO troops in Ukraine. And by rejecting that, we show who's in charge of Ukraine. That is what this is all about. It's not about geography. It's not about some deal that Trump thinks he can do over the Donbass and Crimea or whatever. It's about the destiny of Ukraine and their ability to decide their own future. And one of the things the Ukrainians want is to be on a path towards NATO membership and to be able to invite countries like the UK to support them in Ukraine. So by doing that, we would be making visible the fact of Ukrainian sovereignty and independence. And for that reason alone, I support it.
Thank you. Okay. Question from the audience.
My question is that there is no unified NATO, there is no unified Europe. So my question to Boris Johnson, because he showed incredible leadership at the beginning of this war, is who is going to provide the leadership of a coalition of the willing rather than asking Europe or NATO broadly to do something?
Well, obviously, thanks very much, Brooks, and thanks, by the way, for everything that you've been doing to support Ukraine. Look, it's the obvious answer. Jade is completely right. The obvious answer is the people who are culpable for not honouring the Budapest Memorandum, and that's got to be in Europe. That's got to be the UK and France. We should be leading this.
Mr. Johnson, you have 60 seconds for the last word.
I don't happen to think that we have time now to create a European defence force. We don't have time now to deal with the urgency of the situation. We need that American money. We need that American logistical intelligence support. We need the Americans for all sorts of reasons. And but I think your insight is absolutely correct. The way to keep the Americans committed to our continent, to the security of our continent, is to show that we are ourselves committed to Ukraine. If we don't believe in it, why should they? That's the question. That's the challenge we get from the White House. So the faster we solve this business of the 300 billion, the more committed we are to a peacekeeping or peace enforcing force in Ukraine, the better, and the better the reaction there will be from Washington. That is the way forward.